Hello, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Today we are going to be testing and trying out the new Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes Nature eyeshadow palette. So this is his brand new holiday launch for this year. He has been releasing these Ethereal Eyes palettes for the last few years, and these are probably one of my favorite palettes every year. So this palette is currently available on his website and Sephora. This is made in the US and has a 12-month shelf life. This retails for $69 US or 110 Canadian. So there is a little bit more than the basic conversion going on there, but this palette is a new palette inspired by the power of nature's seasonal renewal with 12 universal neutrals and 4 finishes to create ultimate versatile looks. So this is what the palette looks like. This is in his standard basic white packaging. Opening up the palette, I was really excited by this color story because he does seem to stick to the same sort of neutral shades each year, but this year we have a pop of a bronzy burgundy and we have some pops of olive green. I feel like we can really see the nature inspiration here, but we are going to look at some swatches. We will create, I think, 3 looks, and then I'll show you some comparisons toward the end so you can decide maybe if you still want to purchase this one or if it's worth it for you. So let's pop up the swatches and get into those. So all of the shades are following the exact same naming convention. They are all EEN 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So I will just share with you the numbers. So the shades in here, we have shade 1, which is a satin cream. 2 is a shimmering peach champagne. 3 is a shimmering taupe. 4 is a matte warm beige. 5 is a matte dusty rose. 6 is a shimmering rose gold. 7 is a shimmering golden olive. 8 is a matte caramel brown. 9 is a matte neutral medium brown. 10 is a shimmering golden bronze. 11 is a metallic bronze burgundy. And 12 is a matte mahogany brown. Now, looking at this color story, I do think this is very pretty. I do love that we've got some green pops in here. I love that we have some rosier shades as well. One thing I noticed about some of these shades up here is that they do have this sort of olivey undertone to them, so I think they are going to play really well with one another, and I am excited to dig into this. I do love some greens, I love some neutrals, I love some rosy tones, so this color story definitely speaks to me. But let me zoom you in and we can get to trying on some different looks with this palette. So I'm thinking I might want to create a green look, maybe a rosier tone look, and then maybe something with the browns, but I'm gonna sort of mull that over while I create the first 2 looks. So first, I think I might start with shade number 4 right here. I think the first look I want to create is with the green shades. And this one I noticed had what looked like a bit more of an olivey undertone to it. And I will say, as the seasons are changing, my allergies are starting to act up. So my eyes are watering a little bit, so I do apologize if this eye starts watering like crazy. My allergies had a terrible day yesterday. And I was like, I always forget that I suffer from allergies until that exact point in the season when I'm like, oh yeah, it's time for this unpleasantness. So this shade looks very sort of beigey in the palette. When I swatched it out and as I'm putting it on the eyes, I am seeing that sort of olivey green element to it. And I do think it's quite pretty. I'm also testing out the new Details by Tati brushes. I finally got those in yesterday as well, so I'm excited for that. I only picked up the Essentials set, but I'm already tempted to order the other 2 sets. This brush is the ES4. This is like the crease brush, and this is incredibly soft. I did use the dual-ended foundation brush today, and this is actually incredible. I used it with my Natasha Denona foundation that I already love, but I don't know that it's ever looked this perfect, and it really did save a ton of product. Next, I want something a little bit smaller, so I'm going to go in to this shade right here. I was a little bit surprised to see the price difference on this one between the US and Canada because, you know, this is now 110 Canadian. These are typically around $96 Canadian, and if you convert the 69 US to Canadian, it's about 96. So there's definitely a hike this year, which is a little sad and frustrating. I will admit though, I did order mine from Sephora US because Canada Post is on strike yet again. They were on strike last year around the holidays, and then they were kind of forced back to work. So I guess they've been negotiating since May. They've, you know, taken some strike action, refusing overtime and whatnot, but that's not something we really noticed, especially going into the summer months. When things are typically a little bit quieter, so we weren't really feeling the effects of the strike. But I noticed a lot of brands and companies were saying we're just using alternate carriers because you never know what could happen. And then last week, things kind of imploded and the workers actually walked off the job. So anything I had that was with Canada Post is now stuck until, you know, who knows when. And for some reason, even though Sephora is probably the biggest company I order from, they are using alternate couriers, but only if you live in a major metropolitan area. If you live even slightly outside of a city, they're still shipping with Canada Post. So I can't order from Sephora Canada right now. I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush. I'm gonna go into this deep brown right here. Okay, that is a very, very pigmented dark brown. I'm going to wipe a little bit of that off my brush and then just start blending. But as I was saying, I was just kind of stuck because Sephora can't ship to me right now. The nearest Sephora is about an hour away, but I do actually live in a border town. So it takes me like 20 minutes to go across the border and come back. So I have just been ordering from Sephora US, having it shipped to my US address and just popping over to get my packages. And that's kind of the only way I can get anything from Sephora at the moment. So that's kind of how things are in my world right now. I had actually ordered the new Givenchy bronzer that I was so excited about, but it was trapped in the mail. So I don't know when I'm gonna get that, if at all. So it is adding a little bit to the busy review season, but that's okay. We're figuring it out. Grabbing a shimmer brush now, I think I'm gonna go into this green shade right here. And because most of these browns have that olivey undertone to them, I'm not worried that these are going to get muddy. This is a really, really pretty green. This is the ES5 from Tati, and this is such a good shimmer brush. I didn't wet this at all because I wanted to see how it would apply. I do have some Refer brushes that are incredible for applying shimmer shadows, but nothing like this. I didn't even get any fallout. I haven't wet this brush. This brush is fantastic. Okay, I'm gonna go in to this shade right here because it's a little bit more muted. So I want to use it to sort of meld that lid shade with the outer corner shades. I'm still not getting any fallout whatsoever. And I do think that is very much due to the brush because when I was doing the swatches of this palette before I started filming, I had shimmers from this palette everywhere. Everywhere. These are a very softly pressed formula, so I had shimmers everywhere, but I'm not getting any fallout with this brush. Okay, I'm just cleaning that brush off and I'm gonna go into this shade right here. And I just wanna sort of put this on the inner corner just for a little bit of brightness. So I think that's where I'm gonna leave it for this first look. I do think this is quite pretty. I really, really like this so far. I like how this look came together. It was very simple and easy to create. I found the mattes so far are blending like an absolute dream. They have a nice amount of pigment to them, but they are easy to sheer out. I like the sparkle that I'm getting from that green especially. I think it's super pretty. So far, I really like this look. Let me quickly pop on some mascara and then I'll come back and show you the finished first look, and then we can get into a more pinky look with this palette. All right, so here is the finished look number one with the palette, and I really like this. I love the green. I do love a good green look. I think it looks so pretty, and I love the amount of sparkle that I got from this. I think it's beautiful. So far, I'm really liking these. I'm really liking the green shimmers, but let's hop into another look. I think I want to create something with the more pinky shades in the palette, so I think I might start with this one right here and start buffing this one in the outer corner and the crease as well. My mind does tend to work in very monochromatic increments whenever I am working with eyeshadows or larger palettes, but not even larger palettes, just color in general. If I'm not working with basic browns, my brain is just very, very monochromatic, which is why I'm like, okay, green and then pink and then maybe brown. Maybe we'll try to mix in some color. I don't really know, but we'll see what happens. I do really like these mattes so far. I think they're incredibly easy to blend. They're easy to build, and I feel like they are looking very, very flawless. And I am just grabbing a different brush, but I'm still working with that one rosy sort of matte. I just want a denser brush because I want to pack on the pigment a little bit more. I want to use this one to really enhance that outer corner. And this shade is doing a good job of being a very light crease shade, but also building in the outer corner. It's doing a really good job with that. Next, I'm going to go into this shade right here. This is kind of like a burgundy, which I thought was beautiful. And I've cleaned off that ES5 brush to go in with that because I think this is beautiful. And I want this one sort of placed on the outer corner. Like I said, this is a burgundy, but it does have a bit of a brown element to it. It's a very earth tone burgundy, if that makes any sense. So I'm just placing this one on the outer corner. I'm still not experiencing fallout with these shimmers. This is really, really nice. So because I am loving that brush with the shimmer so much, I do want to try going in with a finger just to see what happens. Maybe these shadows are just really, really amazing and it's not the brush, but I think it's the brush. But I do want to see, so I'm just going to pick up that shade on a finger and see. I start taking this one all over the lid. This shade almost seems a little bit lackluster to me. Oh no, that's better. Building it up is a little bit better. And this is supposed to be like a bit of a rose gold. Okay, I did get a little bit more fallout when I used my finger, but not as much as I expected. I am just going to go back into this flat brush. I want to reinforce that burgundy on the outer corner. Okay, so just cleaning that off again, I'm going to go back into the same shade to use for the inner corner. Okay, let me quickly pop on some mascara and I'll be right back. All right, so we have look number 1 with the green shades in the palette. Look number 2 with the more rosy, burgundy leaning shades in the palette. This one is kind of giving me a bit of a sunset kind of vibe. Feeling very fall with these two looks. I actually like how both of them came together. I think they're both really, really pretty. I think the shimmers are gorgeous. One thing I want to mention is even though I'm getting a beautiful amount of shimmer, I don't know that these are as sparkly and wet as they usually are. I don't know if that's just me, but I don't feel like they're as wet looking and ethereal as they usually are. But let me quickly pop off camera. I will take these off. I'm going to preserve mascara though, and then I will be right back to get into the third and final look, and then we can do some comparisons. Okay, so getting into the final look, I think I want to kind of stick with the browns in here and just kind of see what we can do. I'm going to pick up a little bit of this one. This is kind of like a sequin shade, but I want to sort of put this one sort of all over the lid, just like a light dusting, just to see if it can help sort of cancel everything out. Yeah, this is really pretty as an all over lid kind of shade, just to sort of cancel out any darkness, make everything look smooth. I think this is really pretty for that. It does have a little bit of a sparkle to it, but it's nothing crazy. I don't think you would really notice. Next, I want to go into this brown shade here at the bottom. I'm going to go in with that same crease brush. I do love this brush. It's longer than most of my crease brushes, but it is really, really tapered. I just feel like it's doing a really nice job of blending the shadows and making them look almost airbrushed and just very, very blended. Okay, this is a really nice neutral brown as well. I feel like it's a little bit deeper than my typical kind of crease shade, but it is a nice kind of neutral brown. So same thing on this side. I did also order the new ABH Embers palette, so I have that on the way. I do have the new Pat McGrath holiday palette, which is smaller than I thought, but that will probably be the next video. I'm kind of keeping an eye on the MAC and Dior collections as well, seeing what I might want to review from their holiday collection. I'm excited about a lot of these launches. I am definitely going to be working on sort of a roundup of all of the face palettes that have launched for holiday because I know there have been so many of those. So I'm definitely going to be working on some sort of roundup. I'm not 100% sure what I want it to look like just yet, but I am working on that too. What else do you want to see in terms of the fall videos, the reviews that are coming? I'm just excited about all of the launches. I'm just having the best time drowning in all of the holiday releases. I'm going to go into this shade right here. I've been constantly cleaning off my brush. This shade looks very, very sparkly and foiled. So hopefully we get a good amount of sparkle from this one. This is very, very pretty. Also, I don't know if I've shared this before, but I am a pretty big Swiftie. And so the day that I'm filming this, she just released her new album yesterday. Let me know down below. Do you like her new album? And if you do, what are your favorite songs on the album? I can't stop thinking about it. Normally I don't really talk about a lot of music on my channel. For me, music is one of those things that is a huge outlet for me. I love music so, so much. I have no musical abilities, but I absolutely adore music, but I don't really talk about it here on my channel. I keep everything very much about makeup, but all I can hear in my head is a mashup of The Fate of Ophelia, and then it switches to Father Figure. And those are my two favorites from the album. There's quite a few good ones, but it's like my brain keeps going back and forth between those two songs. So that's kind of what's going on in my brain right now. So just in case I seem unfocused, that's what's going on in my brain. Okay, these shades are really pretty. This is definitely a classic sort of brown look that I would do day to day. You know me, I love my browns. I do kind of want to add a little bit of this deeper brown to the outer corners. So I'm just grabbing a smaller, more precise brush. I'm just keeping this close to the lash line and flicking it out. All right, so I just created a little tiny bit of a shadowing, nothing defined by any means, but I just really tried to flick out the shadow with that brush to create a little bit of a liner shape, but it's not overly obvious. If anything, it's just adding some depth and shape to the outer corner. So I'm going to clean off this brush really, really well and then go into this shade that I've been using for the inner corner shade the whole time I've been using this palette. And just place this right here. I think this looks really, really nice. This is a really great inner corner shade. All right, so this is the finished look number 3 with my basic browns that I love so much. So let me clean this up, I'll zoom you out, and then we can get into some comparisons and my final thoughts. All right, so we have the finished final look, and I really like how it came together. I did kind of expect that I would like all of the looks I came up with today because this is a fairly neutral eyeshadow palette. It's one of those that is very intuitive and easy to figure out what you want to do. I do really like the color story in general. I love the neutrals, but I love the mix of green in here as well. I even like the kind of more burgundy pop that we got here as well. I think they all just played very, very well together. In terms of the mattes, I think the formula is fantastic. I think it's so easy to blend and work with. They're just very, very effortless, which you know I appreciate, and I like how they can be sheared out to act as a crease shade, but then also built up to really focus on that outer corner and build depth and dimension. So I think the mattes are really, really high quality. The one thing I wanted to point out that I think is different is that his Ethereal Eyes palettes are so named because he typically puts these shimmers in here that are just very wet and ethereal. However, I feel like this palette, though the metallics are lovely, I feel like we didn't really get those super wet, ethereal looking shades. I feel like he just gave us standard metallics this year. That's just kind of what I'm noticing after playing with this. I still really, really like this palette, but that is something that I kind of figured out when I was just playing with these and thinking these are all serving as really beautiful lid shades, but I'm not really getting any of those super wet shades that I would probably use as more of a topper. So I did want to point that out. But getting into the comparisons, I did pull up the first Ethereal Eyes eyeshadow palette. This was from a few years ago, and this is the newer one. Now, the neutral matte shades, there's not a lot of differences in the neutral matte shades. It feels like he used a lot of very similar shades, but this is the first one, and this is the one that sort of gave us some of those more basic metallics, but then we have these super, super wet foiled shades. Particularly this shade right here was unreal on the eyes, and it gives the wettest effect to the lids. I'll pop up the swatches really quickly and you can kind of see how the shimmers from the first Ethereal Eyes palette are that more ethereal, wet looking shimmer, whereas the ones we're getting this year are more so the standard metallic, and you can still see how a lot of the neutral shades really kind of matched up. So I think if you have the first palette, you are going to have a lot of these very similar matte shades from the new palette, but you're not going to get that super wet effect from this year's shimmers. I just don't think they're the same type of formula. I don't know if he did that on purpose, but they're really just not the same. And I also just pulled out last year's palette for comparison's sake, because last year's palette was much cooler in tone. It was the Ethereal Eyes Moonlight palette, so it was meant to lean into that navy blue a little bit more. It was meant to give us those cooler tones and sort of nighttime sort of effects, and he did a really good job with that. But the shimmers from last year, much like the first year, were these very wet, ethereal kind of shimmers. And I'll pop up the swatches and you can kind of see they're doing the same sort of thing. The shimmers in the Moonlight palette were giving a lot of sparkle. They didn't have a ton of base to them, but they were more shimmer heavy. And then this year, it's just metallics. So there's not a lot of shade similarities between this year and last year. Last year went blues and cool tones. This year is much more nature, in the woods kind of effect, and I think it's beautiful, but I do think the difference in the shimmer formula is worth mentioning. Now, in terms of other palettes that I have, I did pull out my Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette, because this is another palette that focuses a lot on the greens in here, but has a couple of pops of burgundy. So the Natasha Denona does lean much more into these sagey greens rather than the olive greens that the Mario went for. But I'll just pop up the swatches kind of quickly so you can kind of see where my mind was going in terms of the greens and the sort of olivey undertones of some of the browns, and then even the pink pop. Now the Retro Glam is a little bit lighter, brighter, again more sagey green. If this is like the fall alternative, the Retro Glam I would say would be late winter, spring kind of vibes. So they weren't as similar as I thought, but Natasha Denona is going to give you quite a bit more range in terms of depth, dimension, and also brightness. Now I did also pull out the Yucca palette from Natasha Denona, and this isn't the most similar, but the reason I pulled it out was because of some of these browns and some of the greens. This palette was also very much inspired by nature, just like this newer palette was. But popping up the swatches of the shades that I found similar, so some of the browns are a little bit similar, some of the greens as well, but Natasha shimmers are packing a significant amount more punch in terms of shimmer. Otherwise, the palettes really weren't that similar at all. Next, I pulled out the Emerald Effect palette from Charlotte Tilbury. This is a favorite green palette of mine because I love the formulas in these palettes. I love the greens in here. She's got some olive greens, but she also did a really great job of making sure that the browns in this palette had a bit of kind of an olive green base so that they never looked muddy with the green shimmers. And then side by side, of course, the Charlotte Tilbury has fewer shades and the Mario gives us a lot more lighter, brighter options if that's what you want to do. But the Charlotte Tilbury is kind of like a condensed version of the Mario. And then popping up the swatches, again, you can kind of see those greens, those browns, all very similar. This sort of metallic brown in the Charlotte Tilbury ended up matching up pretty well with the sort of burgundy metallic in the Mario palette. And overall, they look quite similar. I feel like the Charlotte Tilbury is really just a condensed version of the Mario, but the shimmers from the Charlotte Tilbury are much more impactful. And finally, a palette that kind of went with a very, very similar vibe with these very fall tones with the greens, the little pops of burgundy, the golds. I pulled out the Glaminatrix Barely Basic palette. Now this one is next level beautiful. This is an indie brand, so we're getting a lot more impact from the shimmers. So just keep that in mind. But there's kind of a very, very similar vibe going on in terms of, like I said, the browns, the greens, the burgundy pops, and then popping up the swatches. Some very similar shades for the most part, but of course the Glaminatrix shimmers are packing so much more, and I feel like they end up being a little bit brighter. If I had to choose between the two, I would go with the Glaminatrix because you get more options and the shades are unreal, but they do end up being a little bit different. So all in all, this palette from Mario, I like it. I think it's pretty. I don't think it's my favorite of his Ethereal Eyes palettes. I think the first one is probably my favorite. I also really liked last year's palette. I like this one fine. It's just that he has sort of taken the shimmers and turned them into more of a basic metallic formula, which kind of takes out the ethereal element of these Ethereal Eyes palettes, if that makes sense. So I think it's pretty, and I like the color story, and I like the formulas, but at the end of the day, I'm just kind of sad that I'm not getting those super ethereal wet shades from this palette. I didn't notice a lot of fallout. I noticed the formulas worked very, very well. They behaved very well. I loved how they played together. I loved the looks I created. I felt like everything was very easy and simple. So I do like this palette. It's just, I'm kind of missing those very wet shimmers from it. So just keep that in mind. Maybe you didn't like those super wet looking shimmers and you're thrilled to just have some basic metallics, then you might really like this, but I'm kind of missing those a little bit. So it's a good palette. The quality's great. It's just, I'm missing a certain formula. But that is it for me today. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. Are you picking this one up? Are you skipping it? It is a pretty color story, but just let me know all of your thoughts. I love hearing from you guys so, so much. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. I do upload new videos every single week. Thank you again so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one.